Acts prompt Rockford leaders to reconsider city pet ordinance is. 23 News reporter Sydney Stoffregan talks to Alderman Mark Bonney, who says it is time for stronger restrictions to improve pet welfare.
Alderman Bonney hopes to modernize Rockford ordinances by limiting the amount of dogs that can reside in one household. Many residents in the 14th Ward agree animal violence is taking a toll on their community.
Proper training and proper safety, there should be no problems.
14th Ward Alderman Mark Bonney prepares to stand before Rockford City Council Monday to propose an ordinance limiting the amount of dogs in one house from 4 to 3. Bonney says the death of a 14th Ward dog by its violent companions fueled the move towards stronger restrictions.
I don't think it's acceptable. I think it's detrimental to the quality of life in neighborhoods. That who perished in this attack could have been a child, could have been an adult.
Another proposed change would limit the amount of time a dog can spend outdoors unattended each night to less than 20 minutes. Maya Walker and her dog Sosa spend plenty of time together outdoors, but she agrees more needs to be done to keep owners and their four-legged friends safe.
I think a lot of dog owners actually just, like have a fence or even put them on, the lead, and they just leave them outside for way too long. That could be beneficial for these dogs' safety and humans.
Local police officers and animal control would be given the right to impound violent dogs should the ordinance go through. Bonney says the fewer aggressive dogs on the street, the safer the community will feel.
3 dogs is less of a recipe for trouble than 4, and it is what the other communities are doing, or more restrictive. Rockford is operating outside of the norm now.
Residents that currently own 4 dogs will be grandfathered in as long as those dogs are properly registered before the ordinance goes into effect.
Thank you, Sydney. And Bonney plans to bring the ordinance before the full council at Monday night's meeting. If it goes through, Rockford will join Roscoe and Les Park, who have already strengthened their limitations to 3 dogs or less.